Hello everyone, Jules Gill here at an undisclosed science location deep in the heart of science. Now, recently on WhatCulture Gaming, I put out a list on the most devastating doomsday devices in video games. That's why I'm here, and I've gathered the greatest minds of the scientific community, inviting thousands of people to come and test these devices and see if we can make them work in real life in an effort to destroy all humans. Now, admittedly, only 5 of them showed up, but much like my dating life, I will take what I can get. Welcome to my dead talk. My name is Jules Gill, and yes, the doors are locked. What's that in the sky? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Get your eyes checked, mate, because it's actually a giant laser beam of death. That's right, we're talking about Archimedes. Now, Archimedes is considered by many to be the godfather of astrology, engineering, science. Using refraction through mirrors and lenses of glass, he created a real-life heat ray that was able to burn the sails of enemy ships.
I suppose, yeah. If you focus high enough power of light into something. The tricky thing, I guess, would be trying to get a lens big enough.
There was a building in London that had a curved glass front, and the sunlight bounced off it and it focused it in just the right spot that it melted any car that parked on that bit of the ground.
I guess in theory it's possible, right? If you could construct something that would focus the rays of the sun.
A magnifying glass focusing the sun's rays on a spot on this paper illustrates simply the sun as a source of heat and potential power.
You would be able to at least, say, kill everyone on the day side of the planet.
Archimedes may have made one, but it was not very successful, and that's documented. They redid it at Mythbusters, actually. They stood in the heat ray and the death ray, and they didn't die. It was very disappointing.
Now, there's a little saying in the supervillain, I mean scientific community, if you want to make an omelette, you're going to have to break a few continents. And no game better exemplifies that mantra than destroy all humans too. Seriously, this franchise has so many great options to choose from that it made my little reptilian brain spin. But thankfully, once the room had finally settled, I knew which one I should present to you today. And that was the Meteor Strike. Not only are you going to be able to destroy your enemies, but you're also going to destroy every bit of the environment around you. It is the Doomsday device when you have zero left to give.
I don't think that's impossible, actually. So, I mean, some years ago, NASA did have a plan in mind to actually capture a very small near-Earth object and bring it into the orbit of the moon, I think, to send humans up to explore it. So I suppose if you were able to send a spacecraft out and grab a few near-Earth asteroids and bring them into Earth's orbit and attach thrusters onto them.
If you could somehow attach them to the asteroid, you would need to get them there, then you need to somehow calculate the path trajectory that it would take. But yeah, it could be possible.
Prohibitively expensive, though, I expect.
Meteors and other rocks in space are kind of inherently, not random in how they move, but unpredictable from Earth because they're so tiny. They're basically upon us before we even know they're there. That said, there are meteor showers that we know happen at certain times of the year every year. If you could wait for a while and you could kind of say, well, I really want to meteor that building there, but it's not October yet, you know, if you were patient, it would probably be okay.
It would probably be easier to make your own meteorites, right? If you just send a bunch of rocks into orbit around the Earth, just like satellites, and then call them. So if you want to use one, you could kind of set it down. In principle, you could do that accurately enough to try and hit a target.
We humans are a pretty inquisitive bunch, aren't we? We ask questions like, is fire hot? Is this poisonous? But also they ask questions like, what's in the box? Well, if you're playing Devil May Cry 4 and use the Pandora Devil Arm, instantaneous death appears to be the answer. And best of all, I'm not entirely sure how it works, so let's just say magic.
My science cannot and will absolutely not be called magic, and it's a bit disappointing that you're just calling it names.
I don't think that's possible that I know of, and particularly not just by magic.
I don't think so.
That is not possible?
For me, the most interesting kind of transforming thing are slime molds. It's what it sounds like. It looks like a jelly and it can move. It's a living thing and it can kind of change its shape to kind of solve puzzles. It can solve a maze by sending out little slimy tendrils into all the bits of the maze and then it comes back together. So I think maybe if you trained one well enough, you could get it to change into maybe a picture of a gun.
Sometimes, my friends, you can't beat a classic. And Call of Duty's tactical nuke sure is a stone cold one. You drop it on somebody's head and they die. But best of all, in certain game modes, the player who called it in doesn't even die, meaning that you can just pop out a deck chair and relax while flipping the bird to any other would-be world leaders.
Is it possible to survive a nuclear attack if you're surrounded by lead? But even then, highly unlikely.
I guess with tactical nukes, the advantage is the explosion's usually a bit smaller than for the strategic ones, but still, yeah, you have to be pretty well protected underground, I imagine.
So I think radiation doesn't really travel as far as you might expect it to. So if your tactical nuke landed on you, you wouldn't be too hot. But if it was nearby, the seagulls might get radioactive or something like that, but you'd probably be all right if you, stayed indoors.
Radioactive fallout is nasty. There are some microorganisms that are pretty good at surviving though, but our scale, humans, nah, it's not pretty.
Before we continue with this fearsome frivolity, I just want to say a huge thanks to THQ and Destroy All Humans 2 for helping us to make this video. Now, DAH2 is a remake of the classic Destroy All Humans sequel, where you can take control of Crypto as he heads to the 1960s to take revenge on those who destroyed his mothership and his poor old brainy pal. I personally enjoyed taking it to those crusty hippies, and in the words of Ringo Starr, warning them with peace and love, and by that I mean burning them to the ground. So yeah, if you want to indulge in that sort of stuff, then pick up the game, because it's available now for PlayStation, Xbox and PC, and if you like the Doomsday vibes that we're grooving on here, you are gonna absolutely love it. I ask you, is there anything worse than wasps at a picnic? Well, up until 2006 and the release of Dead Rising, the answer was a firm no. But thanks to the release of that game and the weaponized wasps that turn people into zombies, that was changed to a resounding yes. These winged demons of death were actually the end result of a science experiment in order to try and motivate the hunger of cattle so that they would eat more, therefore becoming fatter and more meat for us humans. But unfortunately, somebody left the bloody window open, didn't they?
It's not unprecedented for microorganisms to interact with their host, especially not to make them eat a lot or behave in certain ways. There are fungi that interact with carpenter ants. So these ants are infected with fungi and then walk nicely up a plant and grab the plant with their mandibles. And then the fungi, poof, bursts from their head, spreads the spores and repeats. Fun fact, the fungi is not actually in their brain, but it's on their muscles. I don't know about ant awareness, but if an ant is aware, it's highly aware that it's going through this nasty process.
I suppose the classic example of a kind of zombie disease would be something like rabies. You get bitten by something that has rabies, and then over the course of a day or 2 days or something like that, you start to get more and more irate and irritable. You start to be really afraid of water, and then you start turning violent. You then have to bite someone else to pass it on, which is pretty zombie-like. So if the only difference is instead of being bitten by a dog, you're getting stung by a wasp, then it's pretty likely.
Weaponized wasps sound pretty neat, but bees are really territorial. I'd go for bees.
Now, our next device of devastation is a bit of an interesting one, because in terms of raw killing power, it's probably not up there with the great ones, but it is still pretty deadly nonetheless, because what it does is it forces anyone caught in its gravitational rays to dance forever. Yet how can this be dangerous, I hear you ask? Well, if you're too busy dancing, you're also busy not protecting yourself from being shot at with many of the other weapons in the franchise. Plus, as anyone who's seen my dancing can attest, I look like an inflatable tube man on bath salts, so yes, the embarrassment alone would see me off.
Well, the dancing plague in the 1500s had people dancing for days until they died.
Hundreds of people started dancing and they just couldn't stop, and a lot of them died because of just sheer exhaustion.
There was some sort of like a fungus that worked a bit like LSD, combined with some mass hysteria that had a lot of people dancing themselves to death.
There is a field now called optogenetics, which is to use light to influence the firing of specific neurons. So you can see these kind of experiments actually where people have a blue LED attached to mice skulls, and so they can actually induce specific neurons to fire and cause them to do certain behaviors. So maybe you could figure out something like that with humans if you knew exactly what neurons in their brains are actually going to cause dancing behavior.
I mean, seriously, can we just hire Hideo Kojima to build us some deadly Doomsday devices? Because the man is not short of ideas. Just look at the AI in pretty much all of his Metal Gear Solid games, especially Metal Gear Solid 4, where they introduce an AI which allows the user to literally point at different things on the battlefield and make it die.
If you're a soldier and you get your orders from AI, and then those orders change because the AI has changed, you're probably just going to follow them because you think, well, my computer's not going to lie to me, is it?
So first, how would you communicate to the brain what the AI instructs? So that's one question. And second question, can you create an AI that will instruct people to do its bidding? I do know that there's research into implementing, circuits on the brain, and you come to the part of the AI, which is perhaps an even trickier question. Can you get an AI sentient enough to do its bidding? And then who controls the AI? Can it be controlled?
How do you know we aren't all controlled right now?
So I ask you, friend, have you ever had that mild panic of getting to the bar and realizing that you've left your ID at home? Well, fret not, because I've come up with a rather horrifying solution to this minor problem. And that is by wiping the identity of every single person on the globe. Thanks to the video game Evil Genius, we can see the ID Eliminator in practice. And all it's going to do in order to solve all of the world conflicts and also cut your costs down to, well, nothing, because last time I checked, drones don't ask for payment increases, is the 100% removal of the self.
Right. Yeah, I don't see that one happening.
No. Unless they listen to K-pop.
Keep looking around the room at all these, old white men and thinking, are we not all the same person?
I think George Orwell's 1984, right? If you take away the means of creativity and individualism, you make the very language too simple to be able to express yourself, you give everyone the same message.
That's what fashion is. You control kind of the streams of fashion, what people are wearing, how people are acting, what media people are consuming. You could argue they're all the same person at that point.
So let's talk bottom dollar, my friends. Or technically, let's talk about the dollar flu from Tom Clancy's The Division, which was as deadly as it was smart. This was a virus that was applied to currency and then spread throughout New York during the Black Friday weekend, meaning that by the end of things, well, the Big Apple was looking a little more rotten.
Surface contact on money. In this economy, everyone pays by card.
There was a plague in, 1300 or something, and some people in a village realized that their money was passing it on to other people when they were buying and selling things, which they had to do to live. And so they took all their money and put it in a big jar of vinegar at the edge of the village, and the merchants would come and basically take a handful of vinegar money and then leave the supplies for them, and that way they didn't get the plague from the people in the village.
I think aerial flus would go faster, but the problem with pandemics is that you need to choose either between spreading it very far or killing people. You can't really have both. It wouldn't spread very far if it's very deadly. If you would indeed start at many different places in the world, you could get somewhere, but people would start isolating very fast, I think, with your death rate.
So I know the words death egg are already going to be getting a few of you tight in the science department, but hold on, my friends, because it gets even better. For you see, while this moon is also festooned with weaponry, it's got a super secret final weapon in the form of the final egg blaster. This is the ultimate laser cannon. All you've got to do is collect some crystals, flick a switch, and goodbye Australia.
Well, lasers can definitely burn through things. If you had a laser that was powerful enough, and I mean like incredibly powerful, probably could burn that far. I don't know if shining laser light into the core of the planet would cause an explosion, though.
The planet's core is very, very hot. It's going to be generating a lot of pressure and it's going to be moving a lot because it's liquid. So I think if it were to suddenly be released from being kind of contained by the mantle and the crust and all that kind of thing, it would definitely spread out. Would it explode, or would you just get a kind of planet mess?
You could have a laser of ionizing radiation, so if it was not in the optical but in the ultraviolet something like that. And that would be very deadly. I'm not sure if you could bore all the way to the center of the Earth and make the center of the Earth explode, but you would be able to kill people with it, because it's essentially like very, very bad instant sunburn.
The tricky thing, I think, in that case is that your spaceship would probably fly further out into orbit because of conservation of momentum. Light carries momentum, so if that enormous amount of light is going to the planet, then I think you're going to have the spacecraft going back at the same speed.
You'd need to somehow deal with that. So if you had thrusters that mean that you kind of carry on pushing towards the planet, but then you're pushing the planet away from you. Another thing to remember is if you're in space, you can't just be static in space, right? You have to be orbiting the planet as well. So you have to come up with a way to deal with that, right? Because you're orbiting the planet and you're trying to focus on a particular point. So you'll have to stay focused on that point, but at some point you go past, so you're not able to see that point anymore. And at the whole time you're pushing yourself away, so your orbit's kind of spiraling outwards.
I put all that effort in there. I've tried so hard. I thought they'd actually bite and take one of the ideas. I don't have time for you, mate. What the hell am I going to do? I was meant to come here to prove the feasibility of these Doomsday devices. Now I look like a fool with egg on my face. Ooh, shiny thing.